The dining room went silent the moment the old man's chair scraped against the marble floor. Everyone froze. The mother-in-law's hand was still wrapped around the back of the head chair, the one she had just pulled out for another woman. Not her son's wife. A stranger in a red dress, smiling like she already owned the house. Elena stood a few feet away, holding a stack of napkins she had folded herself that morning. Her hands were trembling, but her face didn't move. She had learned over 3 years of marriage into this family how to keep her face still even when her chest was breaking. Nobody said a word. The only sound was the old man's cane tapping once against the floor as he rose from his seat at the far end of the table. He looked at his daughter-in-law standing there, dismissed like a coat rack in her own home. Then he looked at his son, who was staring at his plate, saying nothing, doing nothing. The grandfather's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Sit down, Elena. That seat has always been yours." And what happened in the next 60 seconds would end a marriage, expose a decade of lies, and hand an entire fortune to the one person in that room nobody thought deserved a seat at all. If you believe kindness should never be mistaken for weakness, hit subscribe before we continue, because this story is about to show you exactly what happens when the quiet ones finally speak. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to go back 3 years, to the day Elena first walked into this family. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't polished. She grew up in a small apartment above her mother's tailoring shop, learning to fix hems before she learned to ride a bike. When she married Daniel, the only son of the Whitfield family, she didn't marry into comfort. She married into judgment. Daniel's mother, Margaret, made her disapproval clear from the very first dinner. She corrected the way Elena held her fork. She commented on her simple dress in front of guests. She never once used Elena's name, only the girl Daniel picked. Elena stayed quiet. Not because she was weak, but because she loved Daniel, and she believed love was supposed to survive discomfort. She threw herself into the family instead of fighting it. She learned the company's paperwork so well that she started catching errors the accountants missed. She organized the Whitfield Charity Gala 3 years in a row, working past midnight while Margaret took the credit at the podium. She never asked for recognition. She never asked for a title. She just kept showing up. But somewhere in that house, an old man was watching. Grandfather Whitfield, Daniel's grandfather, technically retired, technically just visiting, sat at the far end of every family dinner with his tea going cold, saying almost nothing. Most of the family had stopped noticing him years ago. To them, he was just an old man who used to run things, now living quietly on the family's generosity. They didn't know the truth. Not yet. Margaret had been growing bolder for months. Daniel had been distracted, buried in work, easy to manipulate with soft words and harder to reach with the truth. And Margaret had found someone new to prioritize, a woman named Claire, the daughter of a business partner Margaret was desperate to merge fortunes with. She didn't just want a business deal. She wanted Claire in this family instead of Elena, and she had stopped being subtle about it. That night's dinner was supposed to be a quiet family gathering. Instead, Margaret had invited Claire without telling anyone. And when it came time to sit, she didn't hesitate. She walked straight to the head of the table, pulled out the chair beside Daniel, Elena's chair, the one she had sat in for 3 years, and gestured for Claire to take it. "You won't mind standing for tonight, dear," Margaret said, not even glancing at Elena. "We have an important guest." Elena felt the room tilt. Daniel said nothing. He just looked down at his plate, the same way he always did when his mother crossed a line he was too afraid to challenge. For a moment, Elena almost stepped back, almost accepted it, the way she had accepted 100 small humiliations before this one. She didn't know it yet, but everything in that room was about to change. Because the old man at the end of the table had finally seen enough. Margaret's fingers were still resting on the back of the chair when the old man's cane hit the floor a second time. "I said, sit down, Elena." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the entire room like a door slamming shut. Even Claire, still smiling in her red dress, felt the temperature change. Margaret turned, forcing a laugh. "Father, please, we're just rearranging seating for the evening." "There's no need to." "There's every need." The old man walked toward the head of the table, each step slow but certain. "Because you've just insulted the one person in this family who actually earned her place at it." Daniel finally looked up. "Grandfather, what are you? You've been asleep for 3 years, son, watching your wife get treated like hired help in her own home and saying nothing." The old man stopped beside Elena and gently took the folded napkins from her trembling hands. "I haven't been asleep. I've been watching everything." He turned to Margaret. "Do you know why I still come to these dinners, Margaret? Why I sit at the end of the table and say nothing?" Margaret didn't answer. Her smile had disappeared. "Because I wanted to see with my own eyes who in this family actually deserved what's coming to them. And tonight you just answered that question for me." He reached into his jacket and placed a folded document on the table. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just set it down, the way a man sets down something that's been true for a very long time. "This company your husband runs, Margaret, the one you've spent 20 years taking credit for, was never his. It was never yours either. Every share, every account, every brick of this house belongs to me. It always has. Daniel has only ever been managing it with my permission." Gasps moved around the table like a current. "Starting tonight, that permission is revoked. Full control of the company transfers to Elena, effective immediately." Margaret's face went pale. "You can't be serious. She's not even blood." "No," the old man said quietly. "She's better than blood. She's earned it." He turned to Elena, his voice softening for the first time all night. 3 years, and you never once asked for recognition. You fixed this family's mistakes without being asked. You showed up for people who never showed up for you. That's not weakness, Elena. That's the kind of strength this family forgot how to have." Elena's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. The old man wasn't finished. "And this house, the one you've cleaned, organized, and kept running while everyone else took it for granted, the title transfers to your name by the end of the week." Claire quietly stood up from the chair she'd never really earned, whispered something to Margaret, and left without another word. Some fights aren't worth staying for. Daniel finally rose from his seat, walked around the table, and knelt beside Elena's chair. "I should have stood up for you a long time ago," he said, his voice breaking. "I let my mother treat you like you didn't belong here. I'm sorry." Margaret sat frozen at the end of the table, the seat she had claimed for someone else, suddenly the loneliest chair in the room. She didn't storm out. She didn't argue further. For the first time in years, she simply sat in silence, forced to face what her pride had cost her. Weeks later, something quietly shifted. Margaret started showing up to family dinners early, not to control the seating, but to help set the table. She never fully changed overnight. Old habits don't disappear that easily. But she started asking Elena questions instead of correcting her. Small steps. Honest ones. Elena didn't take over the company to prove a point or to punish anyone. She ran it the way she'd always handled everything. Quietly, carefully, and fairly. She gave Margaret a real role in the charity work she'd once taken credit for, not as a reward, but because growth deserves a second chance too. The head chair at the table stayed hers, not because someone gave it to her out of guilt, but because she had never really needed permission to belong there in the first place. If this story reminded you that real strength is often quiet, patient, and unshakable, comment, "I stand with Elena," if you believe dignity can never truly be stolen, only tested. Thank you for watching until the very end.